He is here again. I can't believe how fast the weeks are going. Everybody, here's the next big news that y'all, if you're intermediaries, you need to get behind. You need to get behind it now. You need to start talking to your customers. FMCSA, new rules, speed limiters coming in. My gosh, we got a lot to talk about on Data Day Wednesday. Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly. And Greg takes the spot today.
Look at that, today. Jeff. You
there he goes.
For Greg.
Jeff, how come you're on the show? How did you not get first spot in Good Morning? I don't understand.
I had to give it up to Lisa.
But Greg snuck it and took it. Morning, Greg. Morning, Lisa.
We set off air real quick that Jeff is started to come on the show to make sure he gets the title of first on.
I told you I wasn't going to lose.
Whatever we got to do. So here's the topic today on the most amazing day of the week, Wednesday, Data Day Wednesday, with the mad scientist of data, the one and only Dean Crook, the man of the hour. And here's the thing. You know, Dean, the industry is going through massive changes. There are massive shifts, probably bigger shifts in the market than we've seen in a really long time, if ever. And now we're going to throw another little sprinkling on the cake. And I love cake, but not necessarily this cake.
Not this cake.
Not this cake. Sometimes it's a sour cake. A little bit of sprinkling on the cake with the FMCSA now coming out and saying we're going to impose limiting speed limiters on the truck. So to kick us off, why don't you kind of give us everybody the background as to what's happening, where it is in Congress and Parliament to be the ATA and kind of where it is along the line. And then we can kind of take the conversation from there, my man.
Yes. Yeah, we've got 16 days until comment period is over. So people can still get their comments in through the e-portal. But the bigger issue is that this is one of those more cynical legislation pushes that has nothing to do with safety. It's a bit like ELDs, right? When ELDs were touted as providing, all these safety benefits, well, explain to me why fatal truck crashes went up 2% after ELDs came in. And according to yesterday's data, fatal crashes involving trucks are up 13% in 2021. So, and if you want to search this, go back to March of 2018. I did a webinar for a large company in my previous company, and I predicted this would happen. I said at the time that truck crashes will go up when you introduce ELDs into the industry. And it's very simple because trucks on paper logs were far safer than trucks on e-logs. And of course, companies on, ELDs were around for a long time. It started in 2007 with most of the large truckload carriers after an audit of a large truckload carrier found that their scanned in paper logs didn't line up with fuel receipts and toll passes. So it really started with a liability issue. And the legal department said we can't afford to have trucks, not speed limited and not compliant with the regulations. Now, that's very different to being safe, because being compliant to unsafe regulations won't make you any safer. In fact, the data is showing that it makes you less safe. That's why you see all these trucks racing up and down the highways trying to compress their workday into this finite number of hours they've got. So rushing has become a real problem. One of the highest cost long tail accidents is the high-speed rear end in a breakdown lane on an interstate, based on my experience of dealing with large claims. Guess what drivers are doing now at 7 minutes and 59? Pulling up for their 30-minute break in the breakdown lane. Because if you go over the 8 hours, you get a violation. And you see it everywhere. You see guys pulled up, sitting in their seat on the side of an interstate in the breakdown lane. I mean, that is the most dangerous place to sit, because people on phones are going to hit you in the rear end all the time. I've seen these claims go on for 10 years when you get litigation involved. It's a very costly event, and it usually involves fatalities. So so make no mistake, I've done 2 million miles as an over-the-road driver. This isn't about linear speed. The faster you go, it doesn't mean the less safe you are. In fact, the data is bathtub shaped. So the slower you are, the worse you are. The faster you are, the worse you are. So it's like really fast, really slow are bad. But in the middle, there's a sweet spot. And that sweet spot is your average road speed. It's how you normally drive. And the data shows the OADA data, and I'll just quote you that data. It shows that drivers who deviate from their speed, what was the data showed? You have far more crashes. I'll find it. I'll bring it back to you a little bit later. I can't remember the exact number, but drivers that deviate from their norm is when they have the accidents. In fact, a lot of these high speed rear end accidents where cars hit a truck, 80% of the time it's the car hitting the back of the truck because the truck's going at a slower speed. Mm-hmm. So here's I still have a CDL. I still drive. My truck's not speed limited, but I drive with the traffic flow. I drive appropriate for the conditions. What I will tell you is this isn't about speed. It's about inappropriate speed for the conditions. It's a really subtle point that most people don't quite grasp because everybody gets fixated on linear speed. And it's not linear speed. You can run 75 miles an hour in 11 states legally. But the real issue is this, and this is why ELDs came in. Remember, ELDs limit hours worked, not speed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if I've got 11 hours, what am I going to do? I've just been on a dock. I got to make an appointment. I'm going to go as hard as I can within the legal limits. And here's what the data shows. And this is why ELDs were really brought in to decrease. We're using the right word here, to decrease the capacity of the non-ELD fleets, which was, I put that at about 1 million trucks on the road when I was working at a telematics firm. Paper log fleets were running more miles per day because they could. They were much safer. So paper log fleets were much safer. I studied 30 fleets over 1.2 billion miles. And the paper.
Can you say that again? You studied 30 fleets over 1.2 billion miles.
Wow.
So
that's a lot of data.
So remember, I come from an over-the-road business where when I worked at the ATA in Australia, the Australian Trucking Association, we hosted the FMCSA, Transport Canada, and NHTSA, and we toured all of our FMP fleets in Australia, fatigue management pilot fleets, which is essentially a driver's diary. There's no prescriptive regulation. You have 172 hours in a 2-week period. You put it together however you want. You've got to be sleep apnea screened. Your schedule's got to be approved. You've got to be compliant with all of vehicle safety and all that stuff. And the route you want to run was submitted to a consortium of industry stakeholders, and I was one of them. Insurance companies, the AAA, like everybody was part of this. And so we hosted them and said, if you take the prescriptive number off the day, the 24-hour number, and put it on a week to allow traffic to ebb and flow, you will find drivers will be far more productive and safer and quit less and have fewer accidents. Of course, that's obvious to anybody that's been in the industry. Part of that, because our 24-hour day was aligned with the rising and setting of the sun. Prior to 2004, it was 10 on, 8 off. The old hours of service from 1936. Well, 10 on, 8 off means that your workday starts 6 hours earlier every day. It's a backwards rotating 6-hour schedule. You physically cannot go to sleep 6 hours earlier every day. Right? You physically can't do it. The body is designed to go to bed when the sun goes down, and when the sun comes up, you get up. It's fairly simple. So that's why 2004 went to 10 off, 3 other, 11 on, 24 hours. That was the intent, right? So it was trying to align drivers' work patterns with the body clock. So that was the impetus of that there. The problem that we've now got is that, and this is why ELDs came in, because that same fleet that's running, say, 70 is going to be about 40 miles per day ahead of a guy speed limited at 65. I can tell you right now, if you look at some of the earnings calls of some of these large fleet, they are reporting 1,500 miles per week. So if you're only doing 300 miles a day, how on earth are you going to make enough money to stay in trucking? It's about $16.66 an hour. Right? So if you're limited to 65 miles an hour and you're only running 300 miles a day, let's give you 350, let's give you 400 miles. Let's say you're a super productive fleet driver. Guess what owner drivers are running? Good company drivers. What? 500's a minimum. 500's a minimum. 550. I see guys posting 600 miles.
Yeah.
I can run 650 miles easily within 11 hours in my truck. Now, it takes enormous amounts of skill, patience, vigilance to do it. because it's not easy to sit there and bang out miles hour after hour after hour and stay safe. So if I'm a small fleet guy and you're a broker and you're using this asset side of the industry that's moving quicker, right? Their effective rate per mile is lower than a fleet that moves slower. So the problem has been that when you go back to ELDs, and I'm using the flawed logic of ELDs to say, if we make you compliant, you'll be safer. Well, you could be sound asleep at the wheel and compliant at the same time. The two have nothing to do with each other. But if I'm constantly eating your lunch, if I'm a small carrier and I'm eating the lunch of the large carrier because I can run more miles every day, I'm not speeding. I'm doing under the posted speed limit. I'm always going to be more competitive than you. And that's why ELDs were really introduced to level the play. They talk about leveling the playing field. Yeah. Speed limiters are phase 2. Make no mistake, this will kill more people. The ELD data shows that we aren't safer. We are worse as an industry. Drivers are taking far more risks. Speed limiting, if you have all of the trucks speed limited at the same speed, and they're sitting in the center lane without their CB on, and they're not checking their mirrors because they don't get a CB when they work for the fleet. They're taught to sit in the center lane. If you've got a fleet of national trucks driving at 65 and the posted speed limit 75, guess what car drivers are going to do? They're going to pass you on both sides. Continued. Yep. This is a recipe for disaster, and I just know that it's not linear speed. It's inappropriate speed for the conditions. It's if you go too slow, it's not good. If you go too fast, it's not good. So I think this is one of these really cynical, attempts to, under the guise of safety, will make the industry safer. They did this with ELDs and slipped it under our guard and went through in a bill. I can't remember how it got through, but this one here, make no mistake, this will result in more fatalities. And the reason I'm so hot under the collar about this, I've been to the funerals. The reason I'm here in this country is I buried 2 drivers who fell asleep at the wheel, yet compliant with their ELDs at the time. And I had to go to the families and say, look at the kids in the eye and say, your father's no longer with us. Now, that is why I changed doing what I was doing. And I'm really passionate about this because I know how to run miles and I know how to do it safely. And it's got nothing to do with linear speed. Right? It's about training. How do you train your drivers to drive at the appropriate speed for the conditions? Why don't they have a CB radio? Tell me on what planet is a vital bit of safety equipment not important? You want to limit trucks to 65 miles an hour, but don't put a CB in there so they can communicate with other drivers when there's a white out ahead?
Exactly.
Really? Makes no sense. So I think this is one of those issues where this really underpins that, I've often said that, our government and regulators live on an island surrounded by reality. This is another really good example.
That's a good one.
Bingo. It's a bunch of people who have no clue making rules about stuff they have no clue about.
Well, I've often said, what would it be like if your employer said to you, okay, we're going to cut your salary, but you got to come to work just as many hours a day? Because that's in essence what it is, right? If we can't run those miles because we can't log off when it comes to, specifically to ELD, you can't log off, you can't take flex time, you can't do any of that. They're saying, okay, when your clock starts, and you're sitting on a dock, not moving, so you can't take a flex time or anything. And it no wonder there's so many people exiting the industry. No wonder it's hard to retain higher. We need more drivers in the industry.
Absolutely.
Professional drivers in the industry, ones that know what they're doing, ones that care like you care, Dean. However, you know what? You can go work in a warehouse somewhere and make more money and not have to live with, and I'm sorry, 4-wheelers. Everywhere I go, I see idiots behind the wheel. Trucks going down the road, they pull in front, and then because somebody's coming up behind them, so they pull in front of a truck and brake, and all you see is the smoke come out of the rear end of the trailer on the truck. I see it every time I'm on the road. Like, at a certain point, that gets annoying. Have you guys ever been, like, I know me, I'll go to the hardware store 20 minutes away in the afternoon, the sun's shining, and I'm kind of like in my car, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to roll down the window, turn on the music. That we've all been there. Imagine doing that all day. Come on.
So
we got some great comments too.
Great comments, yeah.
So Greg
Yes.
says restrictive regulations which limit the ability of a trucker to make an honest living have and always will push the driver to break those regulations to put a meal on the table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if
Yeah.
we're going to put all these restrictions, pay them more, get them more money, so they don't have to do all that rush.
Well, DJ, pay them for the hours that they're working, right? So just, I've got a lot of followers on Instagram and TikTok, right? And I sit and watch what they're talking about during the day. And TikTok's become this amazing echo chambers, and it's largely negative. Drivers can sit there in a truck stop and have a rant about what's going on. So you've got to filter all this with the right filter. But when they're showing you pictures of 100 trucks either side of you, and they've been into the gatehouse and got their paperwork 2 hours earlier, and they're still in a line of trucks that is going to probably take them the best part of all day to get unloaded and loaded. A good friend of mine runs up 95 into Presque Main to load frozen French fries. It's not unusual to spend 24 hours on the loading dock, because when you get out into the woods of Presque Main, where are you going to go? You've got to wait it out. And he's getting he's getting detention pay, but it's not enough to offset the opportunity cost of not running the miles. Worse, when you lose a day or a half a day, when you've got a prescriptive limit on how much you can work each day, if you have to pull up halfway through the night because you're out of hours when you'd normally be at the destination, it throws you off cycle and you lose a trip per week at least. Mm-hmm. So you're in the wrong place each morning to unload and reload. Like freight has a flow, a daily flow, a weekly flow, morning drop-offs, afternoon pickups. There's a flow to freight across the country. But if you're held over, you get off cycle, and the next thing you're held over the next night because you're in late, and you lose 300 or 400 miles. And that's what the real issue is. Because capacity is loosening, shippers are getting pricing power. Guess what happens to dwell time? Goes up through the roof. So now you've got drivers even more frustrated because they're spending more time on shipper loading docks that don't have enough staff. This is one of those really hard things to measure, like how many hours drivers actually spend waiting around. But I'll stop my rant because we're 17 minutes into this with one takeaway. At my previous company, we did it was called Omnitrax Analytics. It was a startup company, some other guys and I started. And we built predictive models to predict who was going to have an accident and who was going to quit. And we studied free-form text data. So text. So it was in-cab communication from dispatch to the truck. The driver was sitting there typing in notes into his message machine, and it was the predictor of when we looked at the text analytics, what drivers typed, and we looked at natural language processing software that looks at what words mean. So the word back, I want to get back home, or I can't back the truck. So when you look at the word back, it means different things. You've got to have I wrote a trucking lexicon that the software referenced to find out what that meant. The one word that came up repeatedly in voluntary terminations and preventable accidents after being at an unloading point, there was one word. What do you think it was? Take a guess.
Tired?
No.
Late? Late?
Close.
Yeah.
Close.
Yeah.
Wait or waiting.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like weight, heavy weight.
So
waiting on the dock.
They're typing into their device. I'm waiting on paperwork. I've been waiting all day. I'm waiting on this.
Waiting.
The word waiting came up in 35% of preventable accidents immediately after leaving a dispatcher. And you've probably seen the data that people have done on the speeding events that happen based on the linear hours that drivers spend on loading docks. Because you've got to go. You've got to get to your next appointment. You've got to get to your next pickup. You've got traffic. So remember that what the data shows is when you look at the text analytics, there are words embedded in what drivers use that predict their behavior. Because what does waiting mean? I'm angry. I'm frustrated. You're not paying me detention. Worse, I've got to sit here for 2 hours free because that's what you give the shipper to unload my truck. Mm-hmm. Like, so my opportunity cost there is what? At least $20 an hour for a driver.
Yeah.
Plus the truck, plus the trailer, plus if they don't have a gen set or something on it and they're running full-fledged fuel in the truck and everything. I mean, this
comes back to you guys in the intermediary space, right? Because this is you're buying this capacity and it's underutilized because it's sitting around all the time. Honestly, I don't know how to solve this. I mean, I do, but you could easily apply a weight surcharge just like you do a fuel surcharge. But getting shippers when they have pricing power to change their behaviour is incredibly difficult. This has been one of these things that I've seen in the industry for probably 35 years. It hasn't changed. Maybe Jeff's got a better perspective on this than I do, but this is a really big issue.
Yeah, and the thing is that's the part of the sales side, right? Working on the inside out on the logistics side of the business, then crossing over to the sales. I know that there's a lot of flaws on the logistic operation side for many shippers out there where they have the stall tactics. They didn't stage the material in time. They overscheduled the trailers or the drivers that are coming in there. They don't have the manpower to load up when they come in. The problem with that is, again, that huge word, collaboration. Shippers have to understand that carriers have just as many needs as shippers. And if they would just open up their minds a little bit and ask those pertinent questions like, hey, how can I help you? You're helping us. I mean, it's not a stupid question by any means, but I've seen it. And, not to put myself on a pedestal, but when I was working for Snyder National Intermodal, I had the best dwell times out there in the country because I worked with those shippers. I got my cans in there. We had the free time. I was on top of them. I was working with them to try to figure out a schedule on inbound deliveries and how to get them done and staged appropriately so we could get the guys out of there instead of holding these guys up. I mean, that's the problem with the capacity too. What you do as a shipper affects your fellow shipper. You might be competitors or anything, but what comes around goes around. So you got to help each other out.
Jeff, can I ask you a question? Because it's something actually I've been meaning to ask you for a while. And I think it's going to add massive value to everyone watching and listening later. So for everyone, Jeff used to be a traffic manager. He used to actually manage the freight side.
He was the guy you wanted to call.
He was the guy, you want to speak to. So Jeff, was there a certain situation? Was there a point in time in that where the switch went off and you said, I got to be collaborative here. I have to understand how trucks operate in order to move my business better? What was that moment in time? Or was it just something you've always done? What was that moment in time that you kind of went from a
cares. No.
I mean, there was probably a point where it wasn't like that, DJ. Yeah. You get in, you're trying to do your job, you're trying to get the cheapest rate possible for your company to make things happen. You're kind of inheriting somebody else's department that they set up a certain way. Is it good? Is it bad? Do you even know? Was there a certain point in time? And the reason I'm asking this for everybody watching and listening is this. Listen to Jeff's story, because if there's a point in time, you can actually use Jeff's story with your next shipper to say, I listened to somebody say X, Y, Z, and here's the benefits of what they learned. So there's a reason I'm asking this. So Jeff, can you share that, brother?
Absolutely, Dan, and thanks for that question. The thing is that I started from the ground up, okay? I was loading trucks, driving forklifts and everything way back in the day when we had pony charts and 11 by 17 green bar paper. That was our data. and so what I did was I just started asking those questions, and I kept on creating my own way of how to deal with it. I mean, there's a lot of guys that go into the industry and they administer what already has been created, and they don't make those typical changes. So the thing is try to figure out when you're working on that side, where are the sticky points? What's happening? Go there. If you have a customer, go on the dock and watch them for a couple hours. I mean, you'll see that things just don't add up. When you see the guys coming in there, they're frustrated, guys waiting around the block, parked up in the roadway, waiting for space to get in there. And then you see all this cluster on the dock where nobody knows what's going on. They don't have the material staged. They're not loading it in a quick time. So it's understanding what the current problem is, and then readjusting that by asking those questions to the carriers and the management team, and working all the way up the stream from the order processing to freight billing to everything. You need to figure out a solution as far as why there are so many issues on that dock. That's where the problems start. It's not on the road, it's at the dock. You have to figure that out and ask those questions, especially when you call a traffic manager. That's the door opener nowadays, that you have to figure out where their problems are happening and then look into that.
And
So
this
we
is
got
this
some-
is sort of the sorry.
No, go ahead, Dean. Go ahead. I was just going to go to the comments because they're piling up here. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
the other-
Dean. Finish
the other
your-
thing
finish
I've
your- what you're
always
saying.
the other thing I've always said is, we do an awfully good job at optimizing a truckload carrier business, or any trucking business for that matter, with software and technology. We do an amazing job at it, but then we give it to a driver to execute the plan, right? And then worse, we've got no WMS integration with our TMS, right? So the WMS is the warehouse management system. You would have thought that if you can schedule planes into Heathrow from 10,000 miles away and get them to slow down because there's one slot going to close up, we could schedule trucks into shippers with a higher degree of accuracy. Because you'll have an appointment time, which is way too wide. A driver will get there, it's not ready. And the point I'm making is that when we had paper logs, you could catch up. You could go to bed, have a sleep, catch up, run harder the next night. End of the week, it all's going to add up. This myth of I needed paper logs to run more miles, some did, but some are still doing it now, right? So there's always a percentage that are going to break the law. But the reality is that the gap between the trailer bumper and the dock is where efficiency goes to die in trucking. That little tiny gap, there's so little integration in this world of data. It's a really easy problem to fix with data science if you could integrate. Now, what you need is every warehouse in one place and every truck in. Now, this is way too pie in the sky, but imagine if you had, just like planes and airports, and you had the flow control mechanisms, you could solve this problem. I've probably given some startup an amazing idea. If you could get the money to build this and people would share data, it's actually solvable, but it's a pretty big ask.
But Dean, there's a couple things. You got TMS, you got WMS, and don't forget about the YMS, the yard management system as well, which is critical, especially if you got a fleet and you're bumping doors on a drop and hook. You got to coordinate all that, and schedule that accordingly, because again, it's all the data and what's coming in, to your point, Dean. And, if you got that big operation, and I have one of those, you got to be able to run that YMS like there's no tomorrow to make things work. So,
I had a couple of conversations with some drivers over the past couple of days in preparation for this. And one of the drivers, actually all of them, had said when ELDs kicked in, the stress level went up tenfold. And it's like, I now have high blood pressure. I now have one of the guys, and he's actually been on our show before, where he was like, Dan, like when you're running B trains, like flatbed B trains and going through the mountains, he goes, it's a good hour and a half to sometimes 2.5 hours to sometimes 3, depending on how cold it is, just to chain up. He goes, so, you get your product, you're driving, then the state troopers are on the side of the road saying chains from here forward, or because you've driven it. He goes, not only did I lose this time chaining up. And he goes, like, he's had a heart attack because he's trying to pay his bills. He's trying to keep his life going. And there's just one delay after another, and all dictated by the ELD because he can't log off. And he goes, and it's crazy. He goes, I pull into a truck stop just because the ELD tells me I have to. He goes, and I sit here like this for hours. He goes, because I'm not tired. And then I finally get tired. He goes, and all of a sudden, my alarm goes off because it's time to go. And you better get your arse on the road real fast and haul in order to make up the time. He goes, it caused so many issues for him. And his health is just a major issue now because of it. Now, obviously, some people this doesn't impact as hard as others, but when you start having those stresses that high, like stress is a killer, right? And,
absolutely.
It's when he started talking to me about, he goes, it's not just shipper delays. He goes, like, nobody understands what happens on the road when you run certain equipment. He goes, like, you're running mountain passes and you're chaining up. He goes, like, he goes, Dan, I have seen so many drivers sit there with the chains for 45 minutes, and they're like, and he goes, I got to get ahead of this dude, because this dude is just going to, like, this driver is going to be, he's going to cause. And so he's like, he goes, I'm rushing to put my chains on. He goes, because I just got to get ahead of this guy, because I do not, he goes, it would add more stress to my life to be behind him, just knowing that, like, that chain's going to fall off, that chain's going to fall off, that chain's going to fall off. So it's interesting. We'll get to some comments here, because I think these are awesome. So Maggie says, very oddly similar, a nurse, when our medication administration record went from paper to electronic, the same thing happened. Nurses rushing to get meds in when time frames are limited and people are auditing. You can't stop. Sorry, I just got to get to the point. Here it is. You can't stop life from happening. Proper safety should trump proper documentation. The anxiety alone increases the probability of error. Anxiety alone. Nurfad seconds your motion, Dean, where in Canada it has done nothing. That doesn't show any improvements on safety or limiting fatalities, which is accurate from North America wide. Joshua says, it's sad that the government is so much out of touch with realities of the transportation industry.
Because they live in fairy tale land making up all these rules.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Here's the thing. Like, even when they put ELDs in place, like Dean said, it was a safety thing. It's for safety. And, you know, I think by now we have enough data to say
but listen, ELDs. Okay, here's the flip side to change everybody's mind real quick on ELDs. So you're limiting a trucker's window of making money. That's basically what it is. Same thing. If they put an ELD on us as sales reps, brokers, anybody, you can only email these certain windows. You can only call these certain windows. Do you think people are going to be freaking the F out that they only have certain windows to make so much money?
Are you afraid to swear on a trucking show? I just got to ask. Are you? DJ, it was halfway out of your mouth, and you went.
Listen, it was. I didn't want to get too heated.
Come on, DJ.
If I said fuck, I would have been too heated. So I didn't want to do it.
Yes, DJ, you're absolutely right. Imagine if they would say to you as a warehouse worker,
"You guys can only make money in this window. Hurry up and do it."
You know what? Let me go back to what Dean said way back about, the drivers pulling off in the emergency lane to get some rest and stuff like this. Now, Dean, correct me if I'm wrong, but, cars slamming into the back of these trailers has been going on for decades. It's not something that's new.
Correct.
And then FMCSA introduced the ICC bar, and they put that on the back of the trailer to stop cars from going underneath it. And now they were thinking about where they put the skirts down the side of the trailer to put an ICC bar all the way down there as well, so cars wouldn't go underneath the trailer. Just recently, I just read 2 days ago that an accident on 287 in New York State, to Dean's point, trailer parked right there, ICC bar, family of 3 died. They were going at a rapid speed and they went right underneath it with the ICC bar, and that's a strong piece of metal. So they were cruising.
So, Jeff, I live in a small town. Coming into town, it's 50 kilometers an hour. Okay, so that's 30 miles, I think, something like that, 35 miles. And on the side of the road is the shoulder, single lane each way. There was a truck parked on the side of the road. A car came in. They figured the car was doing 60 kilometers an hour, which is 40 miles, something like that. It hit the ICC bar. The guy was trapped in the car. As soon as they released the car, he bled out. Oof. So and that's at a very, all things considering, a very low speed, right? Like you think about that. Most communities are 35 mile an hour in the community, going through a community, and that happened. And he was in a fairly, it wasn't like a BRZ or something, or where it's like this small tiny sports car or a Mazda Miata or something he was in a decent car. I think it was like a Taurus or something. And so it was a fairly large vehicle. There's a lot of engine to go. And this was just literally a couple of years ago up the top of the road. And all these trucks park on the side of the road. I don't know how many times I've been driving down the road and all of a sudden, boom, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, sorry. You just and you just, at that 1 second that you go off, those ICC
all
bars,
it takes is that 1 second.
They're not.
You see, the other problem too is that a lot of these shipping facilities have limited ability to bring in trucks. So if they overschedule, now the truck has to go find some place, especially, must arrive by a specific time if you're late, whatever. So these guys go up and they find a spot on a regular, public road because they can't go far from the shipper. That's where problems start as well, and you see all these accidents within 5 miles or less of the shipper. I mean, that's documented.
I mean, it's the resounding thing we say all the time. Jeff, you nailed it, but it's collaboration. The only way we fix any of these problems is collaboration. We all have to be honest and see the other person's side and just collaborate already.
And it's got to be a willing. Like every party's got to be willing to collaborate here. And I think this is where a big issue lies as well, is in every level of logistics and transportation and supply chain, it's like me against them. Like Dean, you said it perfect right now. Shippers got buying power now. So what are shippers going to do? Let me rephrase. And we got John Brewer on tomorrow. So it'll be really cool to get his take on it.
Yes.
Oh, amazing guy. So here's the thing. I can recall when ELDs kicked in, and as soon as 2019 came, I had so many customers, and I was the guy that educated my customers, and I'm listening to them go, no, now's our time. We got ripped off, and I'm going, whoa, time out.
Exactly.
Like time out. What do you mean? Just that verbiage, we got ripped off. Rates went higher. ELDs kicked in, and it's funny because if you look at it, and we go back to the original beginning of the conversation, I reached out to multiple people and asked, are your trucks limited? Large Canadian carriers. Yes, 100%, because we go to the US. They're limited. 65, 70 mile an hour was the two limits that I got. Large in captive insurance companies, reaching out to them saying captive. So for anyone that doesn't know, like captive is a insurance outside the insurance world. And it's like a group of people that buy into this insurance, and they're all limited. So same thing with ELDs. If you go back and ask the people, the large carriers, ELD, they were like, we were on ELDs a year before ELDs even kicked in. So when shippers hear that, it's like, oh my God, you're now using this excuse to rip me off. And it's that needs to change. That mentality needs to change. If a carrier or an intermediary, broker, whatever you want.
A standard way of shippers to do things. I mean, look.
But even more, DJ, it's when prices go up, don't gouge people.
Right.
And this is the thing is brokers, like you look at it in the steamship world, right? What was it? Maersk and Hapag Lloyd came out and said, hold on, guys, whoa, time. I think it was Maersk and Hapag came out, whoa, during COVID and said, whoa, we're not charging $30,000 for a container. Like if you're getting those prices, you're getting ripped off by the broker. What does that do? Now they came out and they're saying they're opening their own 4PLs. So they're going to be able to deal direct. And it's like all these things are happening in the industry, and it's because people are getting greedy. And carriers alike, don't get me wrong, for all you asset-based companies out there, I get it. But you got greedy as well. And I know people that own carriers that got friggin' greedy.
Yes.
And so do brokers.
Yeah, Dan, you know what? And I've said this many, many times. When it comes to collaboration, it has to be a win. It has to be a win for the service provider, a win for the carrier, and a win for the shipper. Plain and simple. You have to sit down when you have a prospect and you get the deal. You get everybody on the line. You make those phone calls. You make sure they're on the same page, traveling at the same speed, that they understand the demands all around. Because everybody, let's be honest, we don't do this for free. We have to make money. The shipper has to make money to sell his products to the consumer. The carrier has to make enough money to keep his truck on the road, as well as his driver happy. And the service provider is not going to sit here and schedule and do all this kind of work for nothing. I mean, Dan, you said cost plus. Yes, that's another way of doing it. But just be transparent and let them know what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why you're doing it, and make it clear.
Transparency is the key for everything.
How many times
transparency keeps people from being greedy. It keeps the greedy ones from being allowed to be greedy.
And then you separate the bad ones from the good ones, and you know who to deal with and who not to. The same with the customer. If the customer's not on the same page, walk away. I don't care if it's a couple $1 million. Doesn't matter to me, because you're going to run into problems later on down the road. It's inevitable. It's going to happen.
100%. Dean said something and he said it multiple times on this show. Dean just had to run for a few minutes. He said it multiple times on this show. Leave something for the next person.
Yes.
And that's critical because
take only what you need. I mean,
but DJ, here's the thing is you hear about people, don't get me wrong. I've been that guy. Okay. I'm not trying to preach to the choir. Like I've been that guy that took $5,000 rips. I've been the guy that took $3,500 rips. But you know what? I always had my rips focused on the value and service I brought to the table. So I had one customer, they were in pharmaceuticals. I had huge rips on them, like huge margins on them. But I never said to the carrier, you need to take $300 less or $500. I said, what do you need? This is the job. A, B, C, D, E, F, G is what I need. I need all of this. If you can't provide it, don't quote. They said, I need $5,000. I said, okay, I'll charge a customer $10,000 because I know I'm getting calls at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. If it's 5 minutes late, I have to hear about it for 6 weeks. I wanted a margin that was worth what I had to put in or deal with, on lack of a better term. But it was never on a supplier's back.
Yeah.
Right.
Ever.
Exactly.
Right. And you know something, Dan, the other thing too, and this will drive it home. Look at the cost per fuel and the percentage at 45% out there, and you see the spot market's going down, the fuel is coming up, right? And they're trying to get cheaper rates. I mean, these guys are not going to, it's unsustainable. They're not going to be able to keep their trucks afloat with the 45% FSC out there. Not going to be able to do it. You got to make it.
We got some good comments too. Josh has a few good comments.
Yeah, so Josh is all over it today. Yeah. The only part of the industry where waiting time is adequately compensated is in container trades, $75 to $100 an hour after one free as a standard. You look at this idea of detention charges, and it's, out of that $75, how much actually goes to the driver? And that's, I think, the big question, right? Is so a fleet, if they own the truck and trailer and container and chassis or whatever you're talking about, they have a certain percentage that they want for the utilization of that equipment, right? And in that rate per mile or that flat rate, if you're talking drayage, that's what it is. And I won't pretend that I understand drayage. I've never understood. Like I had guys go to ports, specifically in Montreal was a gong show where I'd be charged like $300 and they'd spend 5 hours at the port. This is the flat rate. We spend 5 hours there and we go and deliver. And I remember saying to them one time, how do you make money? How do your driver sits there for 5 hours? You charge me $300. You bring it back to your yard. You charge me a $50 container off fee and a $50 on
charge fee, whatever,
for delivery. And I'm like, okay. After 48 hours, they charge me a yard storage fee. So for $400, you take a driver, drive 35, 40 minutes to the port, sit there for 5 hours, 35, 40 minutes back, remove it and put it back on, then bring it to the customer, drop it off, and then go back and pick it up and bring it back to the port. I'm like, how is that profitable? I never understood this, but great point when it comes to the detention, Joshua. So Joshua also says, the market is incredibly tight. I saw shippers get proactive and raise detention rates to $100 per hour, but in a loose market, as Dean said, there's no real motivation to be a shipper of choice. That's interesting because that's another probably thing on its own.
He used that term, shipper of choice.
Shipper of choice, right? And to follow it up,
preferred shipper, preferred carrier.
Yeah. He says, follow up. The question with truckload market being so cyclical is OTR surface transportation. How do we get shippers in line to have compensation structures with regards to empty miles, dwell time to always want?
That's our job as brokers. I think we gotta educate more.
To be
shippers, but they have to be willing to. They have to be willing.
A lot of them don't get the deadhead miles.
Said about the cut, Dan. Same thing.
Yeah.
They don't get the deadhead miles. Sometimes they travel 200 or 300 to get to a shipper, and they don't get charged for that,
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing also. I could tell you that for the business that I had that was quote unquote in the spot market where we had to find trucks because it was like sporadic shipments from customers, we would typically say, what do you need? And they would be like, I need this. And I can remember vividly posting on Link and having my team lead go, okay, the phones are about to blow up. And they would post an order and the phones would go crazy. And it's like, I'll be there in 3 hours. And we're like, 3 hours. Yeah, I'm 175 miles away. And they're wanting the same amount where a guy that could be there in 20 minutes because he's empty around the corner. So also in the end, and I think this is something we have to, I hope we all agree on. We do it to ourselves. Like, call a spade. We as intermediaries in the industry, when we try to drive rates down, meaning we try to get more profit, or we try to, the customer says, I'm paying $1,500. You're like, oh, 1,500 is tight. I'm going to try and get a truck for 14. We're part of the problem. And carriers that are somewhere and they're like, I just need to get home. I'll take it for 14. That's part of the problem as well. Right.
Yes.
And I think we have to accept that and understand. And I think that's the first part, right? Like, if we understand anything in life, it's coming to a realization, like, if you have to realize you're not good at something before you got to try and get better at it, right? And I think that's a big part of it. So Greg comes back and says, there's so much teamwork on every shipment until it gets on the truck. Then it's one of those, it's your problem now, deal with it. The driver is always hung out to dry. And I agree with that.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Dan,
how do we get, sorry, go ahead, Dean.
One of the things, we were at our conference on the weekend with some of the top brokers in the country, and one of the questions was asked about this whole question of dwell time, detention, the cyclical nature of the market. And the question was, carriers dolphins or elephants? Right? Sorry, goldfish or elephants. So do they have the memory of a goldfish or do they have the memory of an elephant? And they asked the same question of shippers. Are shippers elephants or goldfish? So when it comes to market cycles, so what would you think carriers would be, right? So this was a survey they did at MIT.
I'd say elephants.
Goldfish. Went back
Goldfish.
Wow.
Really?
The prior market cycle had very little influence on how they behave today. What do you think about shippers, goldfish or elephants?
Elephants.
Absolutely. So the point is, so what we found in the survey from our shipper side of our business is they are working with their carriers to make sure that they have the right capacity, because they are very much aware that this market cycle, as quick as it's turning, it will go back the other direction just as quick. Right? So they realize that, because shippers play a long game. They're a much longer game. Carriers, I think, are playing a much. I don't know what the other opposite is, but shippers are playing chess and carriers are playing something that's not chess, but it's transactional. It's too short term. We don't think properly, and I think that's where the problem is. The shippers right now have just come out of being burnt. I think from transportation cost perspective, they're very much aware that they, and this is a generalization, can't ride the market down, because the quicker they do that, the quicker the market turns and we back into the next upcycle.
The shippers are already burning themselves this way too. It's like they're out there, they're shopping, trying to get the cheapest rate. They have a carrier in place. Their back is against the wall. They go to this carrier that they used to use and they go, hey, we need you to go and move this. If I was the carrier, I would go, well, what have you done for me lately? I mean, you got to feed that carrier annually, all through all seasons, up and down. You want them in your corral, you take care of those carriers.
Relationship's key.
And that is key, because guess what? If there's a lull over the summertime and even now, and now you get into peak season and you need that capacity, and you had that carrier in your back pocket and you didn't feed him, that carrier is not going to be there for you when it comes to peak season, and you need that extra capacity. So you got to figure out and juggle your operation to figure out who's going to be there when you need them and who's not, and keep them
Jeff,
the whole year.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And this is where, and we'll get to Joshua's comment, this is where I've said for ages to salespeople, what are your customers' cycles? Because if you're going to go to market and you're going to go talk to a supplier and you're going to create a partnership, and they say, okay, when's their busy season? When's their slow season? I don't know. You as a salesperson, if you don't understand when your customer slows down and when they pick up, you're missing so much of the equation.
But listen, the problem is on our side too with the training, the education. There's brokerages out there that don't teach that. You just said, and they have no clue what you just said. Anybody who's watching who works at one of those brokerages doesn't even have a clue what you just said, because it's, just see if they have freight. Just see if they have freight. Does this person have freight? It's freight. There's no relationships. There's no trying to figure out what they're doing. Freight.
Make the calls.
The
Make the
hell?
calls. Dial for dollars. Dial for dollars.
that's
Why
it.
don't you have any freight on the board? Why don't you have any freight on the board?
Yeah.
Like DJ, on the sales side, huge issues. On the driver's side, huge issues. On the shipper side, huge issues. On the carrier side, huge issues. There's
And
issues
it all
on
comes
every
down to
level in our
communication and knowledge. We need to
Yeah.
teach more and learn more. Actually become pros in what we're doing. It's
Yeah.
not just about the money.
Ask questions. Ask questions.
Yes. See, here's the thing. You look at just the four of us, right? Dean, how much time do you spend learning, educating, and looking at data?
Oh.
Say no more. Say no more. Say no more.
I spend probably good 8 hours to 10 hours a day solid on
Okay.
data analytics, just
There you go.
crawling data. Yeah,
Bingo.
absolutely.
That's why you're an expert in what you do. Jeff, how much time do you spend raising your bar, learning as much as you can, and bringing solid value to the market?
I don't know. I've got 4 27-inch monitors here, and I've got things open up all the time. And
So,
when my spare
8 to
time,
10
whenever
hours.
that is, I'm looking.
Through osmosis, he's just soaking it in.
DJ, same question for you. How much time do you spend in your career developing, educating, learning, and serving?
So one of my weekly goals every week is 10 hours every week at least of
A day.
read research
Oh,
on
okay.
personal
No,
growth.
but I mean, in full spectrum.
Oh, in
Right? So
full.
put yourself
I mean,
back
it's
in
all
your
day.
sales career. Like if you really want to be the best of the best, it's probably 8 to 10 hours a day of dedication
Absolutely.
of your life to get better. If you're an Olympic athlete, you're not training for 20 minutes a day. You're not.
No.
You're training. And here's the thing. It's not just training. If you're an Olympic athlete, you're eating, you're understanding physiology, you're understanding how you move, you're understanding how you stretch, then you're training, then you're educating yourself on what's the next level.
Yeah.
And as a professional, carrier, truck driver, shipper, intermediary, whatever the case may be, this is what we need to do. And this is the core issue in our world.
Yes.
Dial for dollars. Forget about putting yourself in a logistics manager's shoes. You'll take it on Friday afternoon. How many people have heard, oh, Friday afternoon is when everybody drops ball and I get an opportunity? No, Friday afternoon is when somebody says, you've been calling me for a month. Now's your opportunity. You might never hear from them again, but here's your opportunity to go and beat somebody down to get a truck.
Yeah.
Here's this thing, Dan, to your point. When you're looking at data, and I know Dean does this, all modes, unless you have a specific niche that this is what your brokerage is all about. I'm going to go after truckload. I want to learn everything about truckload. However, if you're a jack of all trades and you like intermodal or LTL or truckload or reefer, you name it, look at the data all the time on every one of these modes. You don't have to be an expert, but if you happen to call up that prospect that happens to have that, at least you can have an intellectual conversation with them without saying, I'm going to have to look in that, because you're not going to go anywhere if you're saying that to them. So you have to be on top of your game and ready to strike when that certain question comes up, that you have a specific answer and that you'll get back to them with even more information about that. That's what
Jeff, I got a question for you, and then I want to get to the comments because
Yeah.
we've decided Wednesday's going to be an hour. We can't go past an hour
We
for
can't go
everybody's
past
game.
that. We are coming
But
close
here's
already.
the thing. So when you were a shipper,
Yep.
so put your logistics manager, traffic manager hat on. You had a salesperson call you that didn't really understand the market, or one that fully understood the market and was striving to be better, achieve more. Which one would you listen to or rather have a conversation with? I think it's
it really all depends, because I got all those calls every single day, 25, 30 of them when you're doing and managing multi-million dollar operations. You got to know my business. You have to know who I am, what I do, what my company does, who we sell to. I mean, if you're just calling up and saying, hey, I have all the best prices in the world, I can get you capacity, I can promise you this, that's not going to happen. You're dead in the water. Do your homework up front, understand who you're calling, and then let's talk some smack on that. If you say that magic word, it could be many. It could be many. I'll listen and give that person a shot. But if you're uneducated and know nothing about my business, you have no luck. None.
So Joshua asks a really good question. How do we get shippers to see the bigger picture? Because on the service side, we see all areas that cause problems we're talking about, but it's shippers that will have to pay for those externalities. And they do. Um,
Yes.
you know, for me, my answer to that would be, like Jeff said, you figure out their operation.
Yes.
You go in and you see the way they're operating. You have you ask them, like, why is it you do this? You do 5 or 6 loads and you take all of the information from those. Let's talk to the drivers. Hey, driver, what really happened when you got there? You were there for 3 hours. So what happened? Like, when you got in, did they send you here? Or, oh my gosh, we're overwhelmed. Like, have those conversations, talk to your carrier and say, I'd like to have these conversations with the driver, because after 5 loads, if there's systematic problems, I'd like to try and address them. And that is really the only way to have them see. And what you got to do is, so here's the thing, like any proposal, you got to bring it in the form of what they listen to. So,
Absolutely.
Mr. or Mrs. Shipper, I've just charged you over the last 5 loads, $500 in detention. Based on the volumes we talked about, 100 loads a month or 100 loads a week or 100 loads a quarter, this is what you can average your detention out to be. If you allow me an opportunity, I can share with you a couple of things that my drivers have noticed, that some of my people have noticed when we've been there, and that we've noticed from an information perspective to help you reduce that. Is that something you want?
Boom.
But this is a call that you, as the intermediary,
that's actually caring about your job and not just going after commission and money.
Exactly.
Bingo.
Boom.
Bingo.
Hey, Dan, on the seasonality point, we talked to a lot of our shippers on our contract side of our business. So remember, this is about $40 billion in annual freight spend, so it's a pretty sizable chunk of the contract shipper market. One of the things we found is during the last year, because of all the tight capacity, shippers started doing more mini bids. They started carving out sections of their portfolio and sending it out to lock in capacity to higher volume lanes with good density. And what they were doing is some of the lanes, I mean, what you'll be surprised at when you do an RFP, there's a lot of lanes that have 1 or 2 loads a week. There's a lot of ghost lanes that never materialize. A lot of carriers quote on lanes where there's no rate. So what they've learned to do is let a lot of those low volume lanes fall through the routing guide out into the spot market for you guys to handle, right? And get a toe in the door. But what they're doing is they've learned to segment their freight into seasonal versus non-seasonal. So seasonal freight gets a duration relevant to the season. The mini bid will be relevant to the season. Non-seasonal year-round freight will generally get an annual duration, and any freight that falls to the routing guide will go to a mini bid. So that's what's changed in the last year, and I think that's why we're seeing more brokers get more contract freight from shippers as opposed to carriers. It's a big change in the last year.
Yeah, Dean, the long-term RFP is not sustainable in this market because there's so much volatility in it. You're looking, you know what? I'll lock in the rates for the next month. Let's reconvene and have another conversation, see how the fuel's going, see how the market's going, because sometimes carriers, I don't know why, they'll overextend themselves and they cannot hold it. And 3 months into the contract, they're going to come knocking on your door and they're going to go, you know what? I looked at my OR. It's unsustainable. I'm going to have to take a 7% increase. No, I mean, it's just like, so it's better to do a short one than a long one, because you're going to burn yourself if you do that. And any carrier out there, I mean, there's a lot of smart ones, and I'm not dishing on any of them, but they're smart enough to realize that can't happen. And if they want to work with that preferred shipper, if they become one, they're going to have those critical conversations both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yeah. So Greg says, let's figure out a way to regulate the shippers and consignees to pay detention. If we can regulate bathroom breaks for drivers, we can regulate the effing shippers until we regulate. That will never solve the detention issue. I agree. And you know what? That's going to be individual shipper. You'll never do industry wide, I don't think. Sorry, not COVID. Sorry.
I don't know if I should laugh about that.
Part of the problem is a lot of these shippers still have procurement models that operate on lower costs, no matter who, no matter what the market conditions. Joshua, I think last year was an eye-opening experience. I mean, and again, I don't have a data set like Dean, but we did speak to 150 different CEOs between November and December of last year, asking them like supply chains, how much are you going to be involved? And 96% of them said they're going to be directly or indirectly involved in supply chain, in choosing the people that run their supply chain and what they can bring to the table. And I think last year was a big year for shippers realizing, holy shit, if my supply chain is not tight, we are going to lose a lot of money. Like one customer that we've had on this show many times, Jeff knows him as well. He works for like a massive corporation.
Yeah, huge.
And for the first time in 45 years, they lost money. First time in 45 years. And I asked him, I said, so what's your mission? He goes, I can't be wrong. This time around, when I choose who I choose to operate my supply chain, no matter what, I cannot be wrong.
His job's on the line.
Well, his job, his whole department, the financials of the company, because the owners and shareholders of the company said, whoa, time out. Nah. We don't lose money. As you know, $600, $700, $800 million corporation, you don't lose money.
And when Greg,
less.
And when Greg says that, trust me, I worked with him. He means it. He means it.
Yes. No, this is great. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up.
So Maggie says, "Hold on, love the four of your full love you four for the full hour. Great mix of different experienced views."
Hey,
you know what, Maggie? Thanks for pointing that out, because that
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. We do kind of have the full circle here going on, but
it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you guys, everybody. Good morning, Preet. I see you there. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. The hour. If you guys like this hour, if you're still with us, let us know below that you liked doing this hour, because I think it was great. I loved having Jeff. Jeff, maybe we might have to add you to the mix here too, because this was fun.
It was great.
The full circle of experiences. But again, thank you, Jeff, for joining. Dean, as always, man. I believe you probably, I think you sold yourself short. I don't think it's 8 to 10. I think it's like 15 hours. You're studying that. It's like
I think you're right, DJ.
Anyways, thank you again, everybody, for joining us. The Mad Scientist of Logistics Data and Triple D Day Wednesdays. Tomorrow we got a great day. John Brewer is going to be on, so don't miss it if you want to see the other side of the story. But again, thank you to American Logistics, Centurion Trucking for making this possible. Dan, as always, you're the man. And that quote to take us out, Stephen Levitt's data. I think it is one of the most powerful mechanisms for telling stories. I take a huge pile of data and I try to get it to tell stories.
Exactly.
Interesting. And I'll add something just before we go, gents. If y'all don't know, Tuesdays, Dean puts on a market update on Data IQ at 10 a.m. So make sure you tune into that, because that has got some killer information. So if you do like a Tuesday, Wednesday on data, you will literally get all the information you will ever need to grow your business and scale like a madman. Okay? Take care, everybody.
Learn all you can, everybody. Take it to your
See you next week. All right.
Yep. See you.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations,